Patti Mount. Patti's the author of a book and creator of a specialty certification course on underwater modeling.
CFAN's reporter Carol Montgomery chatted with Patti about hints for models, whether they be professional or just beginning.
In prior CFAN's photo clinics, we've introduced you to some very special and dynamic underwater photographers. We've also looked at each individual's winning methods and techniques. But what we haven't explored yet is what it's like to be on the other side of the camera. Patti Schaefer Mount is a professional model, above and below the water. You may have seen her work in Skin Diver, Ocean Realm, or Scuba Times. Patti is best known in the diving world for developing and instructing a NAUI specialty certification course for divers who would like to become underwater models. The CFAN's video magazine crew caught up with Patti in Paradero, Puerto Rico, where she was busy teaching her NAUI course to Suzanne Acevedo, a native-born Puerto Rican dive instructor.
So what we'll remember to do is to extend the legs and the toes, okay, for very graceful lines.
Okay, I don't remember about tweaks my body. Can you explain more about that now?
Sure.
I don't remember.
Let's pretend that where your tank and rig is the camera, okay? Now, as you remember what we discussed yesterday, we're going to turn our body and the hips at approximately a 45-degree angle away from the camera in order to slim the hip and the waistline. In order to develop the chest line, we're going to turn it into the camera, okay? And bring the arms back down.
Diving with you yesterday, I couldn't help but to notice that under the water you exude such a special sense of freedom and tranquility. Is that something that's a product of a lot of hard work and training, or is that just your inner self coming out?
I'm not quite sure how to answer that because I have gone through an enormous amount of training, and I'm sure that that has helped me to be the diver that I am today. I find being in the water a very comfortable, at-home situation for me. So maybe that's part of it too.
How do you prepare yourself both physically and mentally before a photography session under the water?
One of the most important things that I've done for myself is to keep myself aerobically fit and in condition for what is a very stressful job. And from there, I have done a lot of studying of photography and modeling to have a better understanding of all the different facets involved. And that has helped prepare me very well. Also, I always try to understand the area that I'm traveling to so that I can be prepared both clothing-wise and equipment-wise to deal with whatever situation may be in front of me. One of the situations that I become involved in is having to remain stationary, as you just mentioned. And one of the best techniques that I use that has helped me to prevent silting situations, which is very common when you have several people working together, is I use a lot of sculling motions with my hands. And also I use a sculling type of motion with my feet and legs, which would extend my legs in sort of a scissor type motion as opposed to the regular kick. It helps me to remain stationary and not silt out the situation.
How do you communicate underwater with the photographer?
In the beginning, communicating underwater is very difficult. After one starts working with a photographer for a while, you start to create some of your own hand signals, eye movements, head movements, because you always have to remember that the photographer's hands are usually full of equipment. So very often if there is a miscommunication and the photographer is there shaking his head no, sometimes I will do the signals myself and ask the photographer, is this what you mean? And in that way we're able to get the story straight and continue on with the shoot.
Let's move underwater now to watch Patti demonstrate several of her modeling techniques.
Using this conch shell as a prop, we wanted to demonstrate how if we put the seashell in between the model's face and the source of light, it would cast a shadow over the model's face. Now we're going to see Suzanne posing with the conch shell as well. Notice how when she places the conch shell in between her mask and the source of light, she also has a blacked out or shaded mask. Now we'll see her moving it slightly over to the side, holding it so that the light source can enter her mask and have her face very nicely lit. In this sequence, you're going to be watching me as I scull back and forth to get myself into position over this coral. Notice how I do not move my legs around very much. Most of the movement is with my hands to back up. Notice also that, as I said before, I don't move very much. The leg that's closer to the camera, I hold up high in the water. As I'm getting ready to come in for the pose, I'll bring it down on the downstroke as though I had actually been swimming all the way along. Swimming along on the reef, we notice these telestation corals growing underneath this little ledge. Due to the fact that if your air bubbles go upwards onto the telestation coral, they will cause percolation down in front of the model and thus create flashback from the strobe light. I prefer to hold my breath while I'm underneath ledges like this, and then I very gently, when I feel the need to breathe, push myself out from underneath the ledge, breathe a few times to make sure that I breathe off the CO2 that's built up from holding my breath, and then I go back into position under the telestation coral. Traveling over the side of the wall, we came across these very beautiful black coral trees in deepwater Gorgonia. I decided that this would be a perfect setup for me to try out a vertical stride pose. Notice the flow of the body, the extension of the legs all the way down through the feet. Also, my lower body is approximately at a 45-degree angle to the camera, which again would slim the hips. The upper body turned back into the camera, which would augment the upper body. Notice how sometimes I might look at the camera, whereas other times I'd be looking at the subject at hand. Now you'll see Suzanne and I playing switch. As you can see, Suzanne is in position, but she's having a little bit of difficulty. Her body seems to be a little bit stiff, and her legs a little bit rigid. With practice and time, she will become much more comfortable in the water with these modeling techniques, and the flow and ease and gracefulness of the pose will soon come to her. Cruising along on the reef, we spied this very pretty yellow basket sponge. So we decided to try some shots on it, pretending that I was posing for a still camera. Notice how low down and very close to the sponge I am in this sequence. That's mainly because I'm posing for a moving camera that does not have as wide an angle as, say, a 15mm lens on an Iconis would. If we were using a 15mm lens on an Iconis, I would most likely be placed higher above the sponge than I am here. In this sequence, we had spotted some very pretty elkhorn coral in the shallows amongst some surge. What we were trying to show here was how buoyancy control is an essential property of underwater modeling. Notice how I'm able to move myself around so easily, breathing and controlling myself. I'm in control at all times, and so can you be.
Now that more and more of you divers are doing at least part of your diving from your living room via VCR, we thought